folks, it is the Turtle Dork back with a new movie review for you today. So this is for Halloween 2018. This is the film that has promised to bring back Michael Myers in a new and fresh and inventive way. They are retconning all of the sequels except for the first film, and this is a direct sequel to that first film, which takes place 40 years after the events when Michael Myers rained his terror on some babysitters and Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode back in 1978. So let's go ahead and get into this film. What I like about this movie. Let's start at the beginning. The beginning of the film I thought was really effective. I loved the opening sequence of this movie. That cold open into that title sequence and hearing that iconic score I thought was amazing, and it really engages you as the audience member. It really gets you into the film, and it builds that tension. And speaking of that tension, I thought they did a really good job of building that in the first act of the film. I like how they're able to treat Michael Myers like we give him a little bit more backstory in this movie, but he's still a mystique. There still is this air of mystique around Michael Myers, around the shape. And then once we go to the other side of that, we look at Laurie Strode. This is what I really kind of connected to in this movie, was her story. Kind of going into this film, I had a little bit more subtext going into it from the Comic-Con panel earlier this year, where we learn about the trauma that she has dealt with over the past 40 years, and with her daughter, with her granddaughter, and how that trauma has affected them, and especially for her daughter, played by Judy, Greer, in such a negative way. But then we see how that kind of comes full circle at the end of the film for her character, for Judy Greer's character. But I like how that trauma not just affects her, but affects that family generationally, through her daughter and through her granddaughter. And I like the exploration of that in the film as well. John Carpenter's score. I mean, we all know the iconic score from Halloween, and I think he's able to take that score and also do something a little bit more inventive with it to really give you kind of this very suspenseful, haunting score that ratchets up that tension that I was talking about before. So his score is just magnificent in this movie. It's a beautiful looking film. I think some of the cinematography is done. I think some of the kills are really inventive in this movie. There's one that deals with motion sensor for some lights outside of a house that I really thought was really cool. But some of the things that I really didn't like about the film, it feels like this film, it's two different films in one. Really, you have Laurie Strode's story, and then you kind of have the slasher film part of this movie. And I think the movie functions well on that front. But for me, I just thought some of the kids, which are Laurie Strode's granddaughter, played by Andi, Matichak, and I'm trying to remember her name, Allison. So Allison and her friends, I didn't dig those kids at all. Like, she has a boyfriend in this movie, and this is something that happens between them at a dance where it just makes you go like, what the fuck? Like some of the things that were happening with these characters, it just really did not get me invested into the film. And then speaking on that, there is a babysitter, another friend of Allison's in this movie, and she has a good rapport with the kid that she's babysitting, and I like the rapport between the two of them. But this is where a lot of, I guess tonally, the comedy in the movie, sometimes when you have these moments that you're building up the suspense for the film, and then you cut it with the comedy. Now, it does work in some films. There are many films where you can really kind of balance that tone, even within the same scene. For whatever reason, man, for me, this just didn't work, especially when it comes to the little kid. And I don't know. I know everybody is loving that kid, and I thought he did a great job in the movie. I just didn't like how they kind of use. I just don't understand why they always have to have us as the comic relief in the movie. You know, when we see that, I had problems with that with the Meg. It's like, okay, Got the black dude don't want to get in water. Surprise, surprise. You know, now we got this kid here. You know, oh, let's go ahead and crack jokes. Let's cut the tension with the kids again. I'm like, okay, I don't know. That stuff in movies is just it's getting tired and it's getting old. And to me, it distracted me from the scarier moments in the film. So, like I said, just overall, that stuff didn't really work. And then there's some stuff with a character that happens. I don't want to give too many spoilers in this, but there's some stuff that happens with a character in the third act where it's a bit of a head scratcher, and it doesn't really go anywhere. I think I definitely understand what they were going for and what they were trying to do. As far as it being effective, to me that just kind of fell flat. The ending was cool, but the way they kind of left it open, because of Laurie Strode and her story and how you have kind of built this over 40 years, I wanted to see more of a definitive ending to this, but of course, because it's a franchise, we have to leave that possibility open. And because you decide to tell this story about Laurie Strode, it just feels like this needed to have a more definitive ending, which going into the film, I kind of figured that it wouldn't. So to me, that was a little disappointing. But yeah, it just feels like the movie is kind of fighting with itself to tell two different stories. But the one that I really kind of connected to, which I thought was great, was Laurie Strode and her family, and dealing with and exploring that, and how Michael Myers has affected that family over the last 40 years. I thought all that stuff was just absolutely phenomenal. I thought that was great. The flip side of that, all the stuff with the teenagers, the kid, the comedy, the one character in the third act, that stuff is very problematic to me. So with all that being said, I think this is a good film. I enjoyed the film, but I definitely will recommend people definitely go check this out, especially if you're a fan of slasher films, if you're a fan of horror, and if you're just a fan of Halloween in general. Definitely go check it out, because it's definitely a worthy sequel. But yeah, so those are my initial thoughts for the film Halloween 2018. Go ahead and let me know what you thought of the film in the comments below. Go ahead, rate, like, subscribe, and share, and go ahead and check out my other dorks at MouthDork, at TheDiscoDork, and at Sidewalk Siren. And as for me, I am the Turtle Dork, and with that, I'm out.